Hey Tiger fans, welcome to another Raw Vision special, and today is an absolute beauty. We're joined by Francis Bourke, and to list Bourke's achievements could take me forever, but I'll have a quick crack at it. He's an AFL Hall of Fame member. He's obviously Richmond Football Club Hall of Fame immortal, AFL Team of the Century, Richmond Football Club Team of the Century, 310 games, 5 premierships for the Tigers, the best and fairest, captained the club and coached the club. So there's not much that Bourke hasn't achieved, so it's fantastic to have you here today. Bourke, thanks for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure, Richo.
Yeah, now you started your footy journey in Nathalia. Tell us a little bit about growing up in Nathalia.
Oh, I think it was pretty typical for a country town, and played in the thirds and in the seconds and finally in the seniors. And in between all that, I had a couple of years at Assumption College, but I actually played 3 years at the end of my time at Nathalia in the seniors, which was fantastic because I was able to build long-lasting friendships with people, some of whom are still up there, and keep my connections therefore with the district. So, but after I left Nathalia, my mum wouldn't let me come to Melbourne to play footy until I was 20. So when I hit 20, I came, and basically never went home. So it was as simple as that.
Yeah.
Actually, I travelled from our family farm for the first 3 years of my league career, playing at the weekends and going back to Nathalia to train, and then coming down again the following weekend, which worked out quite well. But in the end, I had 3 younger brothers and my father, and 320 acres. And it took me about 6 years to work out that if you divided 320 acres by 5, it didn't work out to very much, so I decided to come to Melbourne. Right. And so, as I said, I've been here ever since.
Well, I think you made the right choice. Now, you mentioned your dad, Frank, played at the Tigers, kicked 48 goals in 16 games, but a knee injury cut his career short.
Yes, apparently so, Richo. I think that it's just one of those things. These days, of course, he would hardly miss a game, I think, from all reports, given the technology and the expertise now. But apparently he's a very good player, and I know he is very highly thought of wherever he played, in cricket and footy as well. He was a tall, 6'4.5", 6'5", rangy, mobile, athletic footballer, and smart apparently. So it was just the luck of the draw really for him.
Beautiful. Now, is it true that at the age of 14 you were told by a doctor that you may never play football because you had a heart abnormality? Is that right?
Yes, it turned out I had a slight abnormality in my aorta, but all the doctors could pick up at the time was this murmur, as it was called. So erring on the side of caution, they suggested strongly that I not actually play sport for about 12 months, which absolutely killed me, of course. But at 14 or 15, it didn't matter. In the final analysis, it didn't matter. Yeah.
Now, who recruited you down to the Tigers? How did you come about arriving at Punt Road?
Oh, Graham Richmond and Jack Dyer came to see me, and I didn't need much persuasion to sign. And, of course, in those days, being in the country, you could go to a club of your choice. And, of course, with my dad playing for Richmond, I always bagged for Richmond and wouldn't really have seriously considered going anywhere else, even if I had the opportunity. But so that was basically it. Very happy to come. At the time, of course, you don't know how things are going to work out, but it was always going to be a fantastic opportunity, irrespective of how long the experience lasted.
Well, Bourke, you came down as a key forward, but then you even played some footy as second rover to KB, but then you moved to the wing. Was that always going to be your best position?
Oh, I don't think I knew where my best position in league footy was going to be, but I mean, who cares? You know, I think it was Len Smith's idea at the time, after a couple of games sitting on the bench, to give me a try in the forward pocket, and it was mainly as a forward pocket, almost permanent, which you're going to be changing with Kevin Bartlett, of course, as a second rover. But so I think that was his thinking more so than actually playing on the ball. But I got the odd run, and it was interesting and experience. But then during one of the games, they moved me to the wing for whatever reason, and basically that's where I established myself.
It was a great time to come down to the club, Bourke. 24-year premiership drought was broken in 1967. Tell us about that year.
Oh, for me, it was, once again, I was travelling backwards and forwards, but I think, I mean, we had a good side and a better side than what we realised, because we already had your dad, Alan, and Paddy Ganane, and Roger Dean, and Swifty, Mike Patterson, Neville Crowe, who were all pretty good players, and they formed the nucleus or the core.
Yeah.
And so us, you younger players, then were able to fill in the gaps, you know, with the exception really of Royce and Kevin. I mean, Kevin won the best and fairest in '67, and Royce became a star almost overnight. But we had this, so it turned out to be a pretty good mix of young and old, and it just, we I think only lost a couple of games in the whole year. It was just a fantastic.
Now, you're talking about that finals campaign, going into the finals, not one player had any finals experience. Quite extraordinary when you think about that.
Well, it just goes to show that no matter what, there's no barriers, is there? Doesn't mean to say just because, you know, one way or other, that this is going to happen or a disadvantage. But and we played Geelong, who in the grand final, who were regarded as a pretty good side, and even their stalwarts regard that premiership as the one that got away, because they had a lot of great players. And so, but anyway, it was our good fortune and their bad luck.
Now, what happened in '68 after that? You had a great young team, but didn't make the finals the next year. What do you think went wrong that year?
Well, that's an interesting question, actually. And I don't really know. Royce was a little bit sore, I can remember. But we basically, Freddie Swift went to coach Corowa. That was the only two factors I can think of why that would have affected our playing depth. But look, footballers are not robots; they're human beings, and they have their ups and downs too. And we certainly couldn't match our attitude and approach and exuberance and form, whatever that goes to comprise of, the following year. But the year after that, of course, it all came back again. And so it's very much an up and down phenomenon, isn't it? Form and collective form, and you know, it's an elusive, hard to define quality, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. You talked about '69 there. Halfway through that year, you were struggling a little bit. Is it true there were rumours that Tommy may be going to be sacked, but then you've come home and beaten Carlton in the grand final that year?
Well, there's no question that Tommy was under pressure from the hierarchy. This is the committee end of the club, and I think that had we not finished in the finals that year, and about 6 games out, we weren't looking so hot, there might have been some repercussions. But once again, things clicked. I mean, I can remember Bill Barrett just had an unbelievable 4 to 6 weeks of form, and one day at Princes Park, I remember, after just going in the centre, which was his favourite and best spot, of course, Tommy switched him to full forward, and he kicked 8 goals, I think it was, to turn the game around, and we won. So it was just a stroke of genius on Tom's part to make the change. But single things like that, somehow you remember. It was also the day, I think, that Lionel Rose lost his World Championship, because I can remember the crowd roaring for some unexplained reason at a particular part of the game. So
memorable day all
round. It was a
round.
memorable day for a couple of reasons that I can recall. But Michael Green played his coming of age of league football was that year. As I said, Royce won the best and fairest. Kevin was fantastic. And then Bill Barrett and this core of players, once again, that I spoke of before, really did, come to the fore. But, just goes to show you once again, there's just there there's no predetermined certainties, are there?
Yeah. Well, you missed again in 1970, as you said, up and down. But then you played 4 years finals footy in a row, back-to-back flags, 73 and 74. What are your strong memories of that period and the players that you played with? Who really sticks out, and what are your memories of that time?
I think Richmond against the world. I think we were coached aggressively, and Tommy trained us hard, and some things happened during the course of those years which were very much deemed to be anti or not making Richmond look good, which the club and Graham and Tommy are able to turn around and use as a motivational factor. And of course, because we'd been reasonably successful in the previous 4 or 5 years, Richmond had a huge profile in the media and with their supporters, and so we sort of became looking back on it, really, you can only say, we became a sort of an irresistible force in a way. Yeah. And of course we had a lot of good players as well. And, but I think, and of course in 72 we were beaten by Carlton after being considered pretty good things to win.
Did that really get you guys going? Losing to Carlton in 72, the record score, both teams, you equalled the record score, and Carlton, obviously won that game. Did that fire you up to win the back-to-back flags? Was that the catalyst?
I mean, we don't talk about the ones we lost, of course, but at the time it was a huge motivational aspect, and of course Tom and Graham were masters at fanning anything at all that would spark a reaction. And so no doubt, and of course Ian Stewart had come to the club, Paul Sprout had come to the club, Robin McGee had come to the club. Now these were all players who were on their second clubs, and in a way the Tigers made recruiting players from other clubs quite fashionable because of the success those guys had had. So and that already just topped us off nicely, I think, in terms of our playing personnel.
Well, in 73, obviously the famous game where Barmy went berserk and KO'd Jeff Southby. Is there any story behind that? Can you give us some insight into that and what was said at the time before the game?
Oh, no, look, I don't think that there was anything said in the game about coming the rough stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're building ourselves up for a pretty torrid game, and Carlton, to their credit, I mean, they were no pushovers, and indeed they'd smacked us around in the grand final of 72. But look, it all sort of happened on spur of the moment stuff, and before you knew it, it was on. I mean, Laurie Fowler colliding with John Nichols in that very first foray into the Carlton forward line was just an indication of how determined we were to make amends from the previous year, and I think it just went from there.
Yeah. What about 74? The thing that always sticks out for me about 74 is the famous brawl at Windy Hill. The footage has been shown many times. What are your memories of that day?
Well, I was playing on half-back flank, and when the siren went at half-time, I went into my own little world and sort of walked across to the visitors' room, which was on the opposite side of the ground to where I'd finished, and with my head in the ground, thinking of myself, and I missed all of the ruckus. I didn't see one skerrick. And I got to the rooms, up the race, and all the Essendon supporters were given the Tiger players the business, of course, as you can imagine. And I walked in and I sensed that I'd missed something. Didn't know what it was. But, of course, and then we didn't know what to expect after half-time either, But as it turned out, the game was played in pretty average fashion. There wasn't anything like what you expect after such a fracas had occurred at the half-time interval. But the repercussions, though, at league level and the media were enormous. And once again, this cultivated the Richmond against the world scenario that Tommy and Graham were able to use so effectively. So once again, with the benefit of hindsight, I mean, we were never going to lose 1974.
Yeah. Well, that was the end of Tommy's premiership run at Richmond, 74. Tell us a bit. The two guys influential at that time were obviously GR and Tommy. Just tell us a little bit about both of their main attributes.
Oh, well, Tommy was firstly a person who was interested in his players as people. And he and Maureen were a fantastic double act.
Yeah.
And they built relationships with the players. They built relationships with wives and girlfriends and dads and mums. And interesting enough, I mean, even now, they still do it. And Tom has relationships with his players who he coached at Shepparton as well. And this has just gone on and on and on over the years. And so he was able to, even though he was a hard man, he was able to, he had the great ability to get players to want to play for him. And even players like the Whale and Craig McKellar and Ricky McLean and lots of sort of not normally naturally conformist blokes played their hearts out for him, even though Tommy's way and their way were not necessarily the same way in terms of their outlook on or attitude to life. So that reflects an enormous credit to Tommy's ability as a coach and a person. Graham was the bad cop of the good cop, bad cop partnership. Yeah. But he was, he remains the most impressive, gifted individual I've ever met. Oh. And he was busy with his business. He spared no effort on himself or on anyone else for that matter, or left nothing to chance to make sure that, or do all in his power to make sure the Tigers were continually successful.
Uh-oh. There you go. Oh, perfect. On cue. Bourke, beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know if Graham did that. But he was, and he was intelligent enough and smart enough to be Prime Minister if he wanted to be that. We wasn't interested in being that, but he was a brilliantly gifted orator. He had a great understanding of human nature. He had a wonderful instinct for the game. And above all, of course, he was a great recogniser of football talent. Yeah. And so, in a way, I don't want to sound obnoxious about this, but Tommy and Graham were just too good for everyone else. They were just a great combination, you know. And
well, at the end of '76, Tommy ended up leaving and going to Collingwood. Rumours that he didn't have the full support of everyone at the club, and it came down to a vote. Did GR vote with him or against him?
It's my understanding that Graham voted against him.
Right.
But the vote overall was that Tommy be reappointed. Yeah. But Tommy
wanted the full support.
Yeah, so he left because of that. I believe. I've never actually asked Tommy this, but that's what I understand, and I think that's true. And so that was a great pity in a way, but that's what happens.
Well, your ex-teammate then took over as coach in Barry Bones Richardson. He only coached for a couple of seasons, but what were your memories of Bones' time as coach?
I remember he tried to change our style of game, our traditional style of game, because he considered at the time that football was changing, which it was. And he did a lot of things and that were new and innovative. In addition, he had the likes of Mark Lee, Jimmy Jess, Dale Waitman, Jeff Rains come into the club who he started on their way to, becoming champion players in their own right. So he had a very important impact from that perspective, which shouldn't be forgotten either.
Well, that probably helped set up TJ. TJ came in and got all of those young players that you're talking about. But tell us about when TJ took over, what he did, and then it culminated obviously in a record grand final win against Collingwood in 1980. But
yes.
What did he do, TJ, to bring that group together?
Oh, well, he brought an edge in fitness and attitude, I think. Probably a degree of nastiness in some ways, Tony. But he also trained us like we'd never been trained before, even by Tommy's standards.
Yeah.
And he brought a fella called Peter Grant with him as his fitness advisor, and he was had exposure to Olympic athletes and the way they trained, and so that came as well, an emphasis more on weights.
Yeah.
Was coming into it then, and so I think that also we had the benefit of the Raineses and the Roaches, another one that came in while Barry was coach,
Yeah.
and Dale and Jimmy. They actually hit their peaks as footballers during that 1980, 81, 82 season, I think, that Tony was able to take advantage of, and the rest is history.